Antonio Conte is bang on about Tottenham. This approach, trying to portray Conte as being some sort of madman, it's wrong. He is accurate in every single thing that he said. Yes, he was animated, but he was completely correct. And I tell you this, if the Tottenham players played with half of the passion that was on display from Antonio Conte yesterday, they would currently be in the last eight of the European Cup. They need somebody like Antonio Conte. He is completely right about everything he says. He is correct when he speaks about the press, giving Tottenham players alibis. It's bang on. Let's use Harry Kane as an example here. He is such an example to demonstrate exactly what Antonio Conte was talking about. We always talk about Harry Kane being a brilliant player. I do it. He is. But he let his team down. And last week, we can use a couple of games as a case study. They had 2 games. One of them was huge. It would have put them in the last 8 of the European Cup. The other one was a home game against Forest. Harry Kane, in those 2 games, scores 2 goals. Across those 2 games, he scores 2 goals. What do you think the breakdown is? What do you think the breakdown of those 2 goals is? He doesn't score any against Milan. Doesn't really turn up against Milan. And then scores after, 20 minutes against Forest. Of course he does. And that is what Antonio Conte is speaking about. And do you know what? If you actually analyse what Antonio Conte said about the players, I'd like you, I put a challenge to you. Analyse what he said and tell me how he's wrong. Because I just don't see anything false in what he has said at all. He says that they're less than the sum of the parts, and that is completely true. He says that they've regressed this season, and that is completely true. He says that they do not cope well under stress. He says that they cannot cope under pressure. And he says that there is a culture of excuses and underperformance at the club. All of that is completely true. There is a different question. Should he have said it in public? The answer to that is probably no. But that isn't the point that I'm making here. The point is that the words that Antonio Conte used are spot on. And the way that he is being portrayed as being this wild, uncontrollable force, totally unpredictable, some of that is also true. But there is an accurate understanding. It is meticulous what he has said. Everything he has said, he has gone through Tottenham Hotspur with a fine-tooth comb, and that is his conclusion. And his conclusion is right, and I defy anybody to show me a falsehood in anything that he said. Look, he has now turned on the Tottenham players, right? He's branded them selfish. Is that true? It sounds fairly true to me. If you think about this crop of players, the amount of managers that they've seen off, I think there is an element of selfishness to this crop of players. I think that the fact that he has insisted that they are the ones to blame for the club's history of failure is also spot on. Tottenham have won 2 League Cups since 1991. There is a constant malaise at the club. And this crop of players, the vast swathe at least of this crop of players, have been in pole position to win trophies over the years. And yet they have never done it. The players are responsible. And I think as soon as we start talking about managers, as soon as you start talking about Jose Mourinho or Mauricio Pochettino or Nuno Espirito Santo, who I didn't rate at all, by the way, he's the anomaly here. But Pochettino, despite not being a manager that I particularly rate, is clearly a good manager. Jose Mourinho is one of the best to have ever done it, and Antonio Conte is one of the best to have ever done it. The common denominator here is Tottenham. And when you start talking about the managers being the problem, when you start talking about sacking the managers, and let's think about what happens when you sack the managers at Tottenham. The manager rotates, the results stay the same. That is a constant theme of the Daniel Levy era. So, everything he has said is correct. This crop of players have got countless managers to sack, all very talented. So, I think that Conte was completely right. Yes, he was raging, but he was brilliant. And if I were a Tottenham fan, I would love it. I would love that finally somebody had the front and the bravery to say these words. These are words that Joe Lewis and Daniel Levy have needed to hear for the best part of 2 decades. And finally, Antonio Conte saying it. But the reaction is so weird. People are talking about Antonio Conte being the problem. Of course he isn't the problem. He is the best manager that club have had for decades. That is a proven fact. Think about Antonio Conte's record. Think about what he did. Think about how he started that era of Juve dominance. Think about how he was the man to go back to Serie A and end that era of Juve dominance. Think about how he took Chelsea from 10th to top. Think about his Italian team that was so average but played so well. Think about how even at Chelsea, when everybody was saying it went so badly, we were dreadful in his second season. We finished 5th and won the FA Cup. We beat Jose Mourinho's Manchester United in the FA Cup final. Significant, historic. And we finished 5th. Tottenham Hotspur would love a season like that. So the problem here is most definitely not Antonio Conte. Look, he was clearly emotional. You could tell that he was passionate. You could tell that it mattered to him. And when you looked into his eyes and you could hear his voice, there was no question that the emotion was authentic. But isn't that what you want as a fan? Isn't that what you need as a fan? Somebody to inspire. He sounded like a fan. If you go into any of those pubs down the Seven Sisters Road every other Saturday, I guarantee you people are talking like that. And yet when Antonio Conte does it, we think it's weird. We think it's a liberty. He was animated. He was unpredictable. He was flammable. But he was correct. And that is the point that needs to be hammered home here. He was completely correct. He cared. And now I ask you a question. Have you ever seen Oliver Skip care about Tottenham the way that Antonio Conte did yesterday in that press conference? Of course you haven't. You ever seen Ben Davies put in a challenge that would represent that level of passion that Conte was demonstrating yesterday? You ever seen him? Never. Never. And that is why he actually deserves to be protected. He deserves to be listened to. And he is right. The players have been overprotected at that club. And what he said about Daniel Levy. Now, this is the combustible bit. This is, I suppose, begging for the sack on some level. But again, he is right. Daniel Levy and Joe Lewis are responsible for a culture of losing. And there is nothing wrong with Antonio Conte saying it. Should he say it in public is different. But he is right to present his case. Like, other managers will have definitely thought this. Over the years, other managers will have definitely thought this. But they would be too cowardly or too self-preserving to have the bravery to say it. Conte shouting during that press conference on some sort of monologue, talking about the players being incapable of playing under pressure. He's right. He says that the players hide behind excuses and that a change of manager will solve nothing at that club unless they hold the players to account. And again, he is right. He is completely right. Look, he has set his relationships at Tottenham ablaze here. And it's weird because I don't think I can ever remember a press conference like this. Like, usually when managers lose the dressing room, it's because the players give up on the manager, not because the manager has given up on a crop of players. And I don't think that it will be retrievable now because these words can never be unsaid. But that doesn't mean that he isn't right. That doesn't mean that he shouldn't be listened to. I honestly believe that Conte is correct to defend himself here. Should he have taken everyone down with him? Maybe that's what's needed. Maybe they need to set that club ablaze and build it from the bottom up again. Because the way that it is running, there is 20 years of nothing. 30 years, really, since 1991. 30 years of nothing. And Antonio Conte has had the bravery to flag why that has been happening. How this goes from here, I really do not know. I really have no idea. I feel like his position at the club is untenable. I feel like he's almost issued a plea to be sacked. But that doesn't mean he isn't right. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do you agree with me? Really interested to hear what you have to say here. Do you agree with me? Is Antonio Conte correct? Thanks for watching. Please click subscribe. And remember, I'm going to be on the club for the Arsenal game later, so make sure that you tune into that. See you then. Ta-da.